There's something wrong with this starter base that we built last time, and it's the fact that it looks like we just took it out of Superflat and plopped it in here. Don't worry, we'll be fixing that today. Also, those animals have not moved since I loaded this world. I'm starting to think they're paid actors. But before we do that, I want to change a small detail here. And I'd like to preemptively apologize. If you hear clicking during some of the audio tracks, yeah, that's hail. Sorry. Yeah, I already like that quite a bit more. But to make this entire area feel like an actual starter base and like it's actually lived as opposed to a build that I took out of Superflat and plopped here, we're going to have to integrate it into the landscape somewhat with some details and, some more functional bits that you'd need in survival. And where better to start than a dock for a Viking base? Need somewhere to put the boat after all. And, starting this off like I do most of my builds, just a wool outline. And here is one of the tricks I like doing with wood, especially in docks. It's going from a darker wood, in this case dark oak, to a lighter spruce, making it look like the wood underwater is wet. It's small things like this, using a little bit of color to bring a little bit of immersion to an otherwise pretty simple build. And now here we're just going to texture this dock a little bit with some campfires, some spruce trapdoors, just to make this feel a little bit more worn and give it a little bit more visual interest in something that's otherwise pretty much just a wood floor sticking out into the river. And with that pretty much out of the way, we can get to work on the paths around the space, or at least the start of them. This block palette is one that I like to use a lot for dirt paths in quite a few of my builds. It's a combination of rooted dirt, which has this lighter brown color, paired with the typical grass paths, and simply packed mud. You can see here a lot of it has to do kind of with just getting a general direction, mixing in the blocks as it goes, mixing in a little bit of grass, the occasional greenery, to make it look like a dirt path and not something that's just paved in the color brown. That little bit of growth coming through the path makes it feel a little bit more alive. If this wasn't meant to be a survival base and something that can be reasonably made within the first few weeks of a survival world, I'd have mixed brown mushroom into there as well, just because it fits so well. But anyway, after some more tree clearing, we can get onto the stockades and fencing of this base, which will, like seemingly everything else, be made of spruce wood and mud here. This is a stockade design I actually came up with specifically for this base, trying to get that look of logs that were stuck into the ground and basically sharpened at the tips to serve as a fence. It's seen a lot in a lot of different forms of media, but it's kind of difficult to recreate in Minecraft. What I've taken advantage of here is one of those unique block features that are in Minecraft where fences and walls don't actually connect to each other, which makes it a lot easier to get that sort of pointy log sticking out of the ground effect. You can see on this side, I've just been curving it kind of naturally with the shape of the land, enclosing a little flat area that we're going to turn into some farms later, clearing out another tree there and then getting to work on a small gate. You can see I kind of toyed around with the idea of potentially using the roof design and then ultimately decided that the scale was way too different for that to work. So we pivoted into this much smaller gate design, still going with that look of two crossed logs that's in much of the rest of this base, kind of tying it all together stylistically, adding a little bit of an arch, adding some trapdoors to make those wooden pillars look a little bit more reinforced, a little stronger, and then ultimately tying it together with just a small lantern in the center, providing a little lighting and just a little detail. You can see we're then just going to go on and continue replicating this around the rest of this base. With the stockade out of the way, I get to work creating the rest of these path networks, and a tip as to where to place your paths is just look where you walk most often. For example, in this context, you can see I've kind of followed a natural route from the front door of the longhouse to the rest of the area that's enclosed, and then to the gate from which you'd be entering. It's little thought processes like this, like the where do I actually walk, where would this ground realistically be trodden and turned into a dirt path as opposed to where I would leave it green. It's where you'd be walking. It's these little details that make something feel lived in. Once again, adding those same details, actually introducing a little bit of leaf litter to ease that transition into dirt here. Same story. And now that we have this enclosed space, we can get to work adding things like farms, a well, just other details that are going to make this area feel a little bit more lived in and a little bit less like a massive lawn that's fenced in. One of my favorite tricks for making your farms look a little bit prettier is just to hide your water sources under slabs, under things like, piles of hay bales, something you'd expect to see in a field, or for example, a composter. There we go. They're still there. I mean, they've moved a little bit, but I swear, like, they're just stuck there. That sheep has not moved since I made this world. This is getting absurd. Here, honestly, just regular Minecraft creating a little field for our farm. You need a food supply and survival, so we're going to create a little spot for it. We're going to integrate it into the land a little bit better here, though, because that transition from farmland to grass is kind of jarring. So I used coarse dirt. It kind of has that look of dirt that's been messed around with, plowed open, and it just looks a little bit smoother. And now here you get to see me unable to go in a straight line while planting seeds. This is probably the single least satisfying thing I've had to edit so far. I'm in physical pain watching this. This is awful. I'm so sorry. Okay, it's over. If you have the access to it, the dried grasses that they added in one of the recent updates is a really nice way to add a little bit of contrast to your wheat and also just kind of smooth it into the surrounding landscapes a bit. Obviously, we're in a taiga. It's not natural here, so if you happen to find some, mix it in. Why not? One of my favorite landscaping tricks for areas along rivers is using brown candles and grass to create these pretty convincing reeds. Of course, they're kind of annoying to make since you have to place the block first and then the grass underneath of it, but they do look quite nice in my opinion. And I'm getting to the point where I'm placing grass into rivers. This is fine. I'm doing great. Everything is fine. There we go. Just adding a little bit of detail to an otherwise pretty bland riverbed. We can also, hold on. If we take some either muddy mangrove roots or coarse dirt, not sure yet, we'll see. Turn on replace. Wait, can you actually, is this survival friendly? Can you even do this? No, you can't. Coarse dirt it is. Just making it look a little bit more muddy. There we go. So we can just kind of do this sparsely throughout this river area, and it's going to make this feel a little bit more alive and convincing. And honestly, at this point, we're very much in the home stretch. I'm just creating a little riverbed here with the coarse dirt, adding a few more of those reeds with the brown candles and grass, just kind of tying the environment into the base itself with a little bit of custom terraforming. At this point, I'm also using some leaf litter once again to kind of transition from the brown to the greens of grass. And from there, honestly, there's not all that much left for me to do in this section. And one final detail that I'm going to add is a nice little pile of firewood to keep warm in this climate. Using one of the oldest tricks in the Minecraft building book here, using rails as rope to tie something down, and using a bunch of extinguished campfires to look like little firewood that we've already chopped up. This is one of my favorite tricks to use for building, and then we've got me looking for an item frame in the inventory for about 15 seconds. Sometimes with bases, it's the small things that are going to make it feel alive, like, for example, a banner, Honestly, you can go for whatever you want here. I went for something a little bit, traditional Viking style with the red and white striping like they had on their sails. But honestly, you can kind of go for whatever you want, but it's a small thing like a flag and a quick pop of color in the wind that makes this feel a lot more alive than it would be otherwise. And I mean, even with just that, we're already a lot closer, and you can see that this is already starting to look a bit more like it belongs in the area. Like, it's basically now been worked into the environment around it. It makes sense. There's a fence to keep animals out. We've got a spot where the path clearly comes in and ends. This already no longer looks like something I took out of super flat and plopped into this world. This looks like it was built here and that there's something that can be built around it. And there's plenty of room to grow, and we might continue doing that in future videos. You can see here we kind of got this path going. We could very easily clear this area out, put another house in here, put a shed, an outbuilding, something, just more room to grow. And that sheep has actually turned around. It's moved for once. Progress all around. But anyway, that is all I have for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Viexis out.